All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Kathleen O'Leary, Deputy Commissioner with the Department of Labor and Industry. I'd like to welcome you to our town hall today. I'm super excited about the topic that we're going to be presenting. These employer town halls were something that the Department of Labor and Industry started near the end of March, I believe, as a method to reach out to employers and business owners and others across the state and give them just a method or a forum in order to get some answers to all of the questions that the pandemic has created. Maybe not all of the questions, but as many as we could. And so I think it's been a really successful forum that we have used, and we're getting really good feedback for that. So just a little hints on how it works. It is being recorded and we do place it on our website. And in the chat, I believe Rebecca will put the website link in there so you can find out where you can go back later to refer other people to, or go back and watch it again or listen to it again. Normally, these town halls are done without the video and just audio. However, today we have some really great information that we're sharing, so the video will be on as well. We do have a chat box, so I encourage any of you that have any questions to put those in the chat as we are visiting, and then if we have time, we'll go back and try to address as many of those as possible when Barb is finished with her presentations. So with that, I would like to introduce Barb Wagner. She is DLI's Chief Economist. She is a great resource to us and others around the state. Barb, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about what makes you so awesome and an expert on what you're presenting today?
Thank you, Kathleen. As Kathleen said, I'm Barb Wagner. I'm the Chief Economist at the Department of Labor. I've been here for quite a few years. This is my second recession that we've gone through as the state of Montana. So that's how many years I've been here, I guess. So this recessions are very exciting for economists, maybe not as much for the rest of us, but it's been quite a year. And I appreciate this opportunity to kind of talk about the Montana economy with all of you and share my knowledge and passion about that with everyone. So I guess we'll get started. Today we're going to cover a couple, sorry, I just was having a hard time finding the way to move the slides forward. So today we're going to just talk first about how we entered this recession, because Montana ended 2019 with a pretty strong economic condition. And then of course we had the pandemic coming into the state, and that really caused a large shock to our economy. And then we're kind of talk about recovery. So we're going in chronological order here. So speaking about 2019, and in fact, going all the way back to the last recession, Montana has done a pretty good job in terms of our economy over the last 10 years. We've had this very long, the longest expansion in US history that has placed us in a good economic position to help us weather this pandemic. This chart shows a variety of macroeconomic indicators that we look at, including employment, real GDP, personal income. And you can see actually in this last year, it does look in 2019, sorry, going back just to 2019, we move, it actually looks like our real personal income growth and our real GDP is a little slower than in past years, but we actually were outperforming the nation in 2019. We were 11th best for GDP growth over the last year and 9th best for personal income growth. So we were in a position in our economy of strength heading into this crisis, and that has really helped Montana outperform. One of the really good positive news and reasons for Montana's strong personal income growth over the last decade is our growth in our average annual wage. This chart shows our Montana's average annual wage for payroll jobs, and we're up to 44,883 this year in 2019. And that wage growth has been what is driving both our personal income growth and growth in GDP. And that's a good place to show economic growth in. Wages are kind of the way that we take GDP growth and we transfer that economic growth to everyone in society. So instead of just growth staying with some like specific few business owners or specific worker groups of people, wages kind of help spread that economic growth to everyone in the economy. So that's why we closely look at wages. Wages are also a very good indicator of future consumer demand. So this strong wage growth leading up into the pandemic has helped place our consumer demand in a spot where we can be more resilient to the pandemic that has been happening. I also want to mention real wage growth. That's wage growth that is adjusted for inflation, has been positive in all of the years going, the last 6 years shown, and was last year at 1.2%. Real wage growth is important because it removes the impact of inflation, and it basically measures whether or not workers can buy more with their goods and service, with their wage than they did in previous years. So that indicates that their standard of living is increasing. And that's really what we're after, economic growth. We're not really after 1 more billion of GDP. What we're really after when it comes to economic growth is whether or not people are better off than they were in the past. So that real wage growth is a really important metric for that. Our wage growth has been very strong in comparison to other states. We've had the 7th fastest wage growth over the last decade in the nation. That's been very good for us coming into this recession. So then we get to the point in our presentation where we talk about the COVID pandemic. And we actually have a job tracking dashboard on our website at lmi.gov. The website link is right there, and we hope everybody goes and checks that out. It's very interactive. And I was planning in my presentation to go and demonstrate that dashboard. However, we have had a statewide problem with our internet service. So I've taken some screenshots so we can talk about that dashboard. So we're keep working on that way, but I'm hoping everyone goes out to that website, take a look at it, get some local information about your economy. This is how the job tracking dashboard will look when you go to that website. There are 4 or 5 different tabs across the top, and then tabs within each of those, sub tabs. In each of these tabs have different data, and most of this information is available both at the county level and the state level. So it's a great resource if you're wondering what's going on in your local community. We hope that this provides you with those answers. One of the things shown on the dashboard, and like kind of the lead page on our dashboard, is a number of unemployment insurance claims, which of course were fairly low coming into 2000, but spiked up to over 80,000 people when we went through the business closures in April. That was an unprecedented spike in the number of claims. We were pretty busy at the Department of Labor for a few months, but that number has come down pretty well. We've seen a very good recovery. We're right about 24,000 in the most recent week. I do want to mention that this is the number of Montanans that are filing an unemployment insurance claim. That's different than the data that's reported federally, which is the number of claims that are paid. So this particular chart is people who come to us and report unemployment, which we felt was a better measure of what's going on in the economy. But there could be people in this count. There are people in this count who maybe didn't qualify for a payment. So there is a little bit of differences between these numbers and what's reported on the federal website. And I just want to mention that in case there's confusion. But the trends, of course, remain similar. Also pointing out the initial unemployment insurance claims, these are claims that people have filed for their very first week of unemployment. And you'll notice that we've just started a little bit to tick up in the fall months. And I just want to say that that is due to seasonal factors. We are expecting unemployment insurance claims to continue to increase slightly as we go into the winter months. That's very normal. Montana's economy is quite seasonal. So that, we're continuing to see that in the future. However, overall, you can see that even though we're having more and more initial claims, there's enough people finding jobs and dropping off unemployment claims that our total number of claimants are still heading in the right direction, which you see on the bottom chart there.
Hey, Barb, can I ask you a question there?
Yes.
These are both regular unemployment insurance and PUA as well, correct?
Yes, thank you for that question. So this chart also combines both PUA claims and regular unemployment claims. So it is compiling everyone. And in fact, these initial claims, the chart up here on the top, is actually also included in this chart on the bottom. So the bottom is a total number of people who have contacted the department regardless of the program and regardless of where they are in their unemployment cycle to just report that they don't have a job right now. So
perfect. Thank you, Barb.
Good question. Also on this dashboard, you can click on county information on what's going on in your own county. And I have Lewis and Clark County up here to demonstrate, but you can click on each county in the map and it will pop up with new and populate with new county charts over here. And these two charts, the top one is again, those filing initial claims. And again, the bottom is those filing total unemployment claims, including the PUA claims. So it gives you kind of a view of how that is across the entire state and where we're starting to see hotspots pop up. Right here in Yellowstone County has been, I would kind of a hotspot in recent weeks. They have been having a lot of COVID claims, and that does tend to reduce consumer demand. Overall, this is just the map is colored by just simply the number, not a percentage. So you're going to see those with the highest population levels are also where we see the most claims at. So you can so check that out, see where you're coming from in your own county. We also have another dashboard that shows how many benefits have been paid out, and you can change whether or not you're looking at the total amount of benefits since March 15th. March 15th was when we first saw COVID cases in the state of Montana. So it's kind of from the start of the pandemic, and you can also change it just to look at the most current week as well. And right here on this chart, we are seeing the total amount of unemployment insurance benefits payments that have been paid out over that time period, which is over $800,000 being paid out. That money has been very critical to keeping our economy going during this pandemic and replacing some of the lost wages. Unemployment insurance benefits typically provide, for every dollar that is spent in unemployment insurance benefits, economists estimate that there's $1.9 in economic activity that happens because of those dollars as people spend it within their community. And so it helps keep job losses from spreading to industries like grocery stores, retail stores, and just helps families continue to put food on their table and provide for their families. So if you click on any of the counties here, you can also see the benefits for each one of those counties and get some information for your local area. There are some counties that we suppress because there's not enough unemployment claims. So we want to make sure that everyone's confidential information is protected. So we suppress everything that is less than 3 claims in the most current week. And that's why some of those counties are white.
Barb, can
Yes.
I'm going to jump in here and ask you a question for the benefits that are paid out, the $800 million figure there. Can you just give a little bit of context of what that is, like in a normal year, or just provide a little bit of context around that dollar amount?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head how many dollars we have paid out in last year, although someone asked me that about a month ago and I forgot to write it down, I guess. So that is a really great question. But the most amount of money that we've been paid out is within that $600 federal benefits. Due to two reasons. One, Montana unemployment insurance benefits, our average claim amount is right around $300. So the addition of the $600 really has, expanded the amount of money we've been putting out. So that $600 payments that we were sending until the end of July make up the majority of this 800 million. And of course, we would not have that in a normal year. We also had the $400 payments that we were spending out in the LWA. So that also adds to this dollar amount. But the other thing about this is just the huge number of claimants that we had prior to this pandemic recession. Coming into the recession, we were averaging about 1,000 claimants in some months, so that has been up to 80,000. That's a 10-fold expansion in the number of claimants, which, Kathleen is nodding her head. She certainly has lived through it just as much as I have. Like I said, we've been busy at the Department of Labor in the last few months. So that we've been happy to be able to provide that support to Montanans during this crisis.
Thank you, Barbara. I would add we haven't done a comparison in the last couple months, but I know within the first 3 months of the pandemic, what we paid out in UI was more than what we had paid out to the previous year. So just for context, it is an incredible amount of money when you think about it within a state, a population as small as ours, what it means across the country.
Absolutely. And I do think almost certainly without that, our economic recovery would not have been so strong, and we certainly would be in a worse place in terms of what we look like in our current situation. Also showing on this, on our dashboard, is the number of people who working part-time while they're still claiming unemployment insurance. Not everyone knows that you can claim make a claim while you're also working part-time, but you can. And it is, right as we started, we hit a peak in the number of people working part-time right after the shutdown was over and people started to go back to work. Employers were bringing those people back as part-time workers before they moved them into part-time status. Now you see the number of workers working part-time continue to decline. Now that is because so many people are just moving off unemployment insurance altogether. As a share of the total unemployed, we are seeing an increase in the number of people working part-time. So you kind of have to, the number of people who are moving into part-time work is increasing as a share of the total people. A little bit confusing there, but it's good signs. This is what we want to see about that. So I think it's, providing this part-time employment is a really important component of unemployment insurance benefits for, continuing to provide support to workers as they move back, and also to employers who may not be ready to bring that person on full-time. So that is an important transition piece as well. We've gotten a lot of questions about the demographics of unemployment claimants, and we do have both age. Race is also on our dashboard, although I do not have an example here. And then probably the most interesting is actually the claims by gender, which I'm showing on the screen now. Normally, males make up a larger percentage of unemployment insurance claimants. Right down here, you can see in this bottom left side of the screen is blue is for males and the orange color is females. So typically during normal periods, males comprise a much higher share of unemployment insurance claimants than females. That's largely because of the construction industry, and which is male dominated. As people move into the winter months, construction workers move into the winter months, they come on unemployment insurance. But during this pandemic, because of the industries that have been impacted the most, we've seen women become the majority of claimants, which is, you can see happening right here. Now that is largely because women tend to be employed in the leisure and hospitality industry, which we'll talk about a little bit later as one of the most impacted industries, and also because there has also been a loss of childcare opportunities, and with school-age children needing to learn from home, that has also impacted women a little bit more than men as well. So that both of those two factors have played into this change in the gender demographic of claimants. Also on the job tracking dashboard is some positive news. We also track the current number of job openings, and right now we're running at about 9,000 job openings that we know are available out there in Montana, looking for workers, and that's so people can come online. You can also look for your local county. If you click on the map, then it will bring up the what types of jobs are available in your community, and also what expected wage you for that occupation that you might be expecting. If you click on the retail salesperson or whatever else occupations that are here, it will change these wages so that you know what will be expected wage in your community. As for what types of jobs are available, it's pretty typical for what is normally our job openings in the community. The ones that are listed here: retail salespeople, nurses, truck drivers, cashiers. They tend to be very large occupations in Montana, and they're always topping the list of jobs. So we haven't seen a huge shift in the type of job openings available. They are down a little bit from where they were last year, but we want to stress that there still are openings. And our job service offices are great about connecting those claimants and the unemployed with open jobs that are in their communities. So please give them a call for some help doing that. The last thing I want to talk about is our Comparative Statistics dashboard that is also one of the last tabs on our dashboard. And this looks at how Montana is doing compared to all other states. And you can see Montana going from the start of the recession. The peak of the recession is in February 2020. And now the most current month of data is August of 2020. Montana has performed the 6th best state among all other states. For how our economy has performed, you can see that we're still down about 18,000 jobs, but that is less than many other states. This is true both as a percentage and a numeric change, that we're still doing well comparatively. And really, that comes from two things. Our job growth exiting the recession from April to August has been pretty strong. We actually ranked 20th in the nation. We've had a 9.2% gain in our employment levels from the lowest point in April up to now. And then also our fall from February to April was also less than many other states. Finding Montana here, we're 15th in the lowest number of loss, losing roughly 11% of our employment from the February peak down to the April trough. So both we outperformed the nation coming down, we have outperformed the nation coming up, and that both of those things contribute to our being 6th best in the nation for how we've performed during this pandemic. Lots of things contribute to to that. Certainly Montana has, up until recently, had a lower rate of COVID cases than many other states. And that has allowed a lot of consumption consumers going out and interacting and purchasing things. So our consumer demand remains stronger than in other areas because of the lower COVID case. Also, our shutdown during the month of April was a little shorter than shutdowns in other areas, and we lifted those restrictions a little quicker, and that allowed us to get back to our recovery sooner than many other states. So both of those factors have contributed to our better than average performance. The last thing that is on our dashboard, but this also provided in a chart here, is how our payroll has done, our payroll employment has done by industry. And probably, what sticks out on this chart is, of course, the leisure and hospitality industry. That is places like restaurants, hotels, tourism-related businesses had a nearly 50% loss in their employment levels during the month of April. That's a huge hit to the industry. It's going to take a long time for that to recover. We've seen, and you can see on this chart, they've come back up to about 85% of their previous employment level, which is amazing growth, right? Like the job growth coming out of that April trough, was unbelievable. We added 20,000 jobs in the first month and 16,000 jobs in the next month. That's usually what we add in like 2 or 3 years. So the amount of our recovery has been amazing, right? But there's still that loss. And I think particularly the leisure and hospitality industry is one where we're not going to expect that industry to fully recover until tourists can come back in from other countries. So we're talking, until a vaccine is worldwide available before that will really resume. And, even after that, we can assume there's going to still be a little bit of time before that fully recovers. So that's probably the industry that we're most concerned about now. Other industries, we actually have new data coming in and showing that some of these industries may have even been better than what our preliminary data was showing. Construction doing very well, specifically that was an essential business in Montana, and so they our new data coming in is showing them nearly back to their level earlier in the year, which is fantastic. We've seen good gains in, education and health services. Hospitals were a large part of the layoffs earlier in the year as they shut down the elective services. However, that has come back and they're growing well now. So we've seen a really great recovery, but there's still a lot left to go. That we certainly don't want to minimize the unemployment levels that we still have. This, just looking at the headlines here, we did lose over 60,000 jobs in April. That is a very, very large loss. We rapidly regained some of those, but we're still down about 18,000 jobs. That's 3.5% total employment. There's also another employment series. We have 2 different employment series that we use to measure the economy. And so this other employment series is actually showing us down about 28,000. That's 5.7% of our payroll employment. The actual number that we're be getting in as we get more and more data, we're be able to narrow down that range to get more accurate estimates of the economy. It's probably between those 2 numbers. But just for comparison, during the 2009 recession, our employment levels declined by 4.5%. So in comparison, we had in a 1-month loss what it took us a 1.5 years to lose during the 2009 recession.
That's
so
crazy.
That is, it's pretty significant. And, I guess for an economist, exciting, maybe not. It's been a wild ride for everyone.
Yes. I can jump in here. Can you briefly explain the difference between total employment and payroll employment?
Oh, good question. So total employment includes self-employed individuals, also some agricultural workers. Payroll employment are basically people who get a paycheck every month, and is more closely related to the number of people who also are eligible for unemployment insurance. So although now those that are self-employed can also get unemployment through PUA. I also wanted to mention that in the last couple of months, we have seen, we had a very rapid recovery by July of rapid job growth. That employment growth has been slowing. Some of that is expected, right? The last couple of gains are going to be harder than the first few gains, but it is also fairly obvious that our economy has also been challenged by this increase in the number of COVID cases. What that means is just, as the number of cases rise, there are consumers who are less willing to go out and even to get takeout. Or, I think of my parents who have been doing their best, thank God, to hide out during this pandemic, and they're just not as willing to go out and engage in our local communities through spending as they would be when the cases were much lower. So that is an important thing to keep our eye on in coming up in the next few months. I just wanted to check in with you, Kathleen, on, I looked at my time. We're at 12:30. Okay.
We're good. We're perfect.
Perfect. So we do at the department also look at other economic indicators, and this chart shows both the GDP growth and the personal income growth, and it includes data from the second quarter, which is, the big negative quarter. But two things, Department of Labor, we're definitely more focused on the employment situation. Two, we've seen a stronger growth, at least nationally, in our GDP than we have in our employment. The labor market has been very slow to recover. And so that is one of the reasons why both nationally and at the state, we remain focused on that employment number. But looking at these two, there's also, it's hard to provide a lot of context to these numbers as well. We look at our GDP growth over the last quarter. The red is the United States, the blue is Montana. And, Montana lost 8.5% of our GDP growth our GDP decreased by over 8%. That is just such a large number in comparison to where we were in the past that it's hard to really provide that context. And we also don't have data from the third quarter yet. State data comes out a little later. We will probably get that data in late December. So then we're kind of know more about what our GDP is looking like. Obviously we had a bad second quarter. We all know that already. So we haven't gotten enough data to really be meaningful yet. Personal income growth is kind of also interesting. Look how huge that growth was in the second quarter. Kind of insane as well, also hard to provide perspective on. But where that is coming from is actually from the stimulus payments and the additional $600 in unemployment insurance benefits. Those are received by personal income. It is also interesting, maybe more from the wonky economist side, of how disassociated the GDP growth was from the personal income growth. Normally these two indicators come along hand in hand. They both track in different ways. The economy, GDP, looks at what is produced. Personal income looks at how much Montanans receive from that growth. And so the disconnect between the two is I guess, again, exciting for an economist, maybe just a little bit weird for the rest of us. But that big personal income growth is primarily from the amount of stimulus that has come into the state. And, obviously the US also got a large boost there. And again, when we get more data, this will put that number in context.
Barbara, I do have a question there. Why, for the personal income growth, why is Montana so much higher, it appears, than the United States? Do you have any insight on that?
Yes, that's a great question. So part of that is the $600 payments and the amount of money that we did put out into the state. $600 goes a lot further in Montana than it does in New York. Right. And when you talk about wage replacement, You know, $600, there's a lot of people in Montana that don't earn $600 in a week normally. So that $600 was a lot bigger than what they would have been getting as a wage. Now that may not be true in Seattle, New York, LA, and some of the bigger cities. So like in comparison to our previous personal income that we were receiving, that $600 payment was bigger.
Right.
So that's where we're getting. Also, you know, as we've talked about, our economy measured by any metric has outperformed the US in that second quarter because of the smaller shutdown and because of the lower rate of COVID. I also think probably because our economy is so, and our lifestyle kind of has so much outdoor activity in it already, that we were able to kind of maintain our lifestyles and our economic spending a little easier than some of the poor folks that live in the big cities, who, you know, even when you go outside, you may be a little too close to your neighbor.
Right.
So
Right.
certainly there's all sorts of reasons. Montana's doing better than the US is probably the best answer for that. And there's other reasons as well.
All right. Thanks, Barb.
So kind of taking a step away from the statistics, I think it's important to realize that this COVID recession is not the same as other recessions. In most recessions, you know, we slowly lose jobs over a long number of months. You know, consumer demand slowly moves down. And those jobs are really slow to return when that happens because consumer demand needs to continuously build up before they can come back. And during this recession, it wasn't that supply and demand were impacted because of the shutdown. They still existed. They just weren't allowed to interconnect. And so that caused this immediate impact to the labor market. And then immediately those jobs could return. So, however, the longer we go on where we're not allowed to make normal consumption decisions, the more we're in the situation of most recessions where it takes a long time for us to recover. So that is one of the biggest concerns and why economists both here in the state and nationally are talking about we have to address the spread of COVID-19 as an economic issue, because the longer we have those high levels of COVID-19, the more people like my parents are not spending their money. Me either. I mean, I certainly would love to be going to concerts, but you can't when the case count is so high. So that is our number one priority for the economy right now. In the long term, both in the short term and in the long term, we require a healthy workforce. But in long-term growth, you know, we've been talking for the last several years about how important our workforce is and how, you know, we've been talking about problems with our worker supply and how we need more workers and better trained workers to continue our economic growth in Montana. That's still true. And, you know, every single worker that we take out of our economy will have an impact on our long-term growth. So I think that is my pitch for today on mask wearing. The other thing that we're looking at as we move forward in our recovery is the childcare issue. We estimate that there's at least 20,000 parents in Montana. This is typically the female that is more impacted, but both genders are impacted by this. They aren't able to fully return to work because of a lack of childcare. That is both at the daycare level and you know, monitoring the at-home learning through the school system. And you know, right now we're still, you know, on an earlier slide I said we were still down about 18,000 jobs. We have about 20,000 people that aren't able to fill those jobs. So I think, you know, there are businesses out there who probably have been advertising jobs and have felt frustrated by a lack of applicants, but you have to remember that there's still this large group of people, the parents, who aren't able to come back to a full-time job yet. And until we solve that problem, we are not going to be able to return to full employment levels. So that is another critical part of this recovery. It's not just about job growth here. It's about public health, and it is about maintaining a childcare system for parents so that they can return to normal workload.
I do have some questions on this slide, Barb. So
Mhm.
when you are talking childcare, and you alluded to it a bit, but I just want to confirm, can you define what you are talking about when you say childcare? Are we talking about schools as well, or go ahead?
Certainly both schools and so our 20,000 estimate, we looked at it in a number of different ways. There is about 100,000 kids in Montana's school systems that are under the age of 12, who we reasonably estimate those parents kind of need to keep an eye on those kids under 12. We also looked at some employment data of people who reported that they were unable to work because of kids. That's where this is mostly coming from. And then we've also looked at some estimates of the number of daycare and childcare facilities for kids under 5 primarily, but after school as well. So we came up with this number using a variety of different methods and kind of settled on this one. To be honest, it could be anywhere in between 20,000 and 50,000.
Yeah.
I think at this point it's probably closer to the 20,000. I have 2 economists right now who are really struggling with finding childcare, so I feel this issue strongly personally. And we know that that's happening. Nearly every single one of my friends that have small kids have been challenged by have and school age children have been challenged by this scenario, and it is tough to multitask.
Right. Oh, most definitely. Yeah. Can you speak at all to prior to COVID? We knew that childcare was an issue within the workforce anyway, but because of the pandemic, it is most certainly put really a spotlight on just how critical it is to our economy. Do you want to add anything to that?
Exactly that. It's been an issue that we've been talking about a lot in the last 8 years, and we know that roughly there's about 40% of demand in the state is actually for daycare under the age of 5 is being met by the current level of childcare. The Missoula Chamber of Commerce has done a great study on this. It's been an issue in every major city that we've talked to. We hear this a lot in communities, that childcare is a problem and that they can't get enough workers because there's not enough childcare in the community. So certainly that was a problem before. COVID has really made this problem an acute problem that is so obviously slowing our economic growth. And we simply will not be able to return to our previous employment level without addressing this issue.
Right, exactly. And I don't want to put you on the spot, Barb, so if you don't have this information, we can put it out there afterwards. But are there any costs or dollar amounts you can associate with what the challenge of finding affordable and accessible childcare is for parents, for employers or businesses, or the state overall?
Mm-hmm. The Bureau of Business and Economic Research at Missoula just recently published a report in conjunction with the Minneapolis Federal Reserve. We also, as the Department of Labor, worked on this project as well through a business survey. And the report published by BBER did put a dollar amount, and off the top of my head, please go see the report to find the actual number. But I remember it being probably over 800 million per year, if I could be wrong on that exact number. But it was a really important, they confirmed what I've been saying, and that it has limited the growth of our economy. It particularly harms low income and reservation areas, and that it has been a drag on our economy because we've been needing workers. We still need workers, and we simply cannot be providing that childcare. What was really interesting in the report to me from a Department of Labor perspective is how many people turned down jobs or turned down training opportunities because they didn't have the childcare available to go take advantage of those opportunities. That's not just an immediate impact, that's a long-term impact that we're slowing our economy and our human capital that exists in our economy because we can't figure out this issue. So it's an
Right.
important one, and I do recommend everyone go check out that report.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think the other thing to note too, when we're talking about childcare as an issue, is people often automatically assume it's something for younger parents. However, we're seeing a larger and larger percentage of people who are grandparents leaving the workforce or early to address childcare needs for their grandchildren. And especially when we're talking about COVID, that's creating all kinds of issues as well. So it's not just younger parents, but it's the older workforce as well that's impacted by this.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So moving on, we do have a question of when our economy will recover. And, certainly we just discussed two issues that are kind of still up in the air, which is the childcare issue and, the rising case counts. The longer that happens, the worse our recovery will be. So I want to say that we make these forecasts with a great deal of uncertainty as well. Our forecasts, the Department of Labor's forecasts are based solely on employment levels in the state of Montana. And we're forecasting that Montana will return to full employment in the middle of 2021. That's, I think we recently just got some new data that is coming out on this, and we have some early data that I can't quite specifically talk to yet, but I think the data in some ways will maybe push us back to late 2021. In comparison to national forecasts and those done by, I mentioned BBR already, we are a little more optimistic than other areas. So far, we've been pretty well on track with our employment forecasts. But I want to stress that it's a big loss. We did lose a lot of jobs, and it will take us a significant amount of time to recover. And I think with the recovery in the stock market that has already happened, people have forgotten about this aspect of the labor market. It has still really showing signs of struggling. And so it's important to keep that in mind, that is where most people receive their economic benefits is from working. So we really need to keep focusing on the labor market and other economic metrics and not necessarily how the financial markets are doing as we feel whether or not we've fully recovered. I mean, I'm happy the financial markets are doing well as well. All of our retirement funds are looking a lot better. So another question we've received a lot is how the economy is going to be different. And that is one of, a very fascinating topic, right? And how much will the economy change because of this COVID? Certainly in the short term, we know what's happening. We know that there's more jobs in grocery stores, fast food, online delivery, that takes truck drivers, right? There's fewer jobs in restaurants. There's fewer jobs in any sort of service where you're providing direct contact with customers has dropped down. So there's certainly a shift, and we do think that tourism is going to take a long time to recover because you're waiting for that consumer in Japan to feel comfortable coming to the US, not just the customer down the block. But there's also a lot of questions of like how the long-term impact will be. Like, certainly we will be having more work at home than we did before, but we probably won't be at this level again, right? Like, I think we'll see a return back to the office. Online shopping, same thing. People still like human contact, even though this probably kickstarted a lot of transitions there. But one thing that I've been most optimistic about during this recession, and what I've liked to see the most, is how much innovation has occurred. We're talking to business owners across the state, and what they say is, we've made this change and it was really tough, but it saved us a lot of money, and now we're doing things better. And there's a lot of that happening as well. And it's really hard to see where that's going in the future. I was actually listening to a national economic presentation last week where someone suggested that oil demand will never be at the same level it was in 2019 because now it's down so much, and then we probably have less demand for gasoline because people are working from home. And by the time that demand comes back, we'll all be driving electric cars. I think that might be a little bit of an overstatement because change is slow to happen. Humans like to be in their spots. So I personally feel like we probably aren't going to be making radical changes, but certainly the economy will look a little different. And there's a lot of really innovative things that Montanans have been doing that I think has been spurred by the COVID crisis that in some ways are revolutionary and will lead to a better economy in the long run. So that part is really exciting to watch. And with that positive note, that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I am not seeing the chat box right now. So if there's any questions there.
Yeah, there is a question in there, Barb, and I do have a couple follow-up for you as well. Kim was wondering in the child care slide if that also included things like after-school programs.
So our estimate, certainly after school programs are also an area where there's a need for childcare, but our estimate is simply counting the number of adults who reported that they weren't able to fully participate in work. So it could be from any of those. That's the question they answered is, have you been limited from working by childcare? So along those lines. So could be any age level, could be after school care, could be daycare. Hard to break that out.
Perfect, thank you. So you did talk a little bit about this, but what are you most worried about the next few months?
Certainly the rising number of COVID cases. We're moving into the winter months where we typically have higher levels of sickness and colds. Like I said, I think Montana's economy has been doing better because we already have an outside lifestyle. To the extent that stays true in winter months, get your skis out. That's going to help. But I am worried about that we were not able to kind of flatten the second curve before we got into fall. And I'm hoping to see improvement in that. That's what I'm worried about. I'm also worried, there's some uncertainties we have no control over. There's an election, there could be global events. That's also a concern. Any sort of dramatic political events that happen outside our current knowledge. And then I'm worried about, and I alluded to it several times in my presentation, I'm worried about this concept that just because our stock market has recovered has found its last highs, that we forget about the average worker, the average Montanan who is still looking for a job and still struggling in the labor market. And that is important to our communities. Like that's where we need to be focused on when we talk about the economy.
Right, exactly. Is there anything that Montanans can do to address some of the concerns that you have?
Wear a mask.
Yes, I would agree.
I think there has become a discussion to just remember that that mask allows our economy to continue to operate and allows our fellow people in our community to continue to interact and engage. And certainly we'd all love to be at the Kettle House listening to a great concert again, but we can still go out and listen to music in an environment where we're socially distanced with a mask on, and to find those solutions that allow us to continue our lifestyles, but do so in a manner that's really safe.
Perfect.
I think and the other thing is really continue to innovate. I've heard so many stories about businesses during this crisis finding new ways to do things. It's really, really rewarding to hear about those things, and keep at it, Montana. Doing great.
I love that, Barb. Do you have any other closing thoughts you would like to add? We're getting close to an hour here.
I don't have any other closing thoughts. Thanks for asking. I do think that we're doing well as a state. We're recovering well. We are a little concerned both nationally and at the state level that the second wave is concerning impact and growth. And of course, there has been lower stimulus dollars being sent out as well. So that's a kind of a concern that's hanging out there in the larger world. But I think that there are more immediate things to think about in Montana, which is, solving our childcare issues and maintaining our safe and healthy workforce.
Right, perfect. Thank you so much, Barb. I appreciate all of the insight and the data you presented today. I would also like to give a shout out, not just to you, because you're such a great resource to all of our state and so many people who reach out to you individually as an expert on the manner on these kinds of things within our state, but also to your team as well, all of the economists that work at DLI and the data analysis team. I hope that people that have not been familiar with the work that you guys do on a day-to-day basis got just a little taste of it today and see and recognize really how critical that information is for employers and business owners and policymakers across the state. And do you want to touch on a little bit about your webpage, the lmi.mt.gov webpage, and what kind of information people, everyone can find there and how often it is updated?
Yes, and thanks for saying that. We have a great team at DLI, and it is critically important. Everyone plays such a large role in accurate data and getting that information out on our website. And we really try hard to provide that information in a way that's easy for people to consume. You don't need to have a degree in economics to know what it means. We try to make that easy for you. So that takes we have a great team, and they do a great job. Our website is at lmi.mt.gov. You can get to the job tracking dashboard that I featured in this presentation by going to that website. I also recommend going to our publications page where we have some of our EAG articles. There's some articles on the path of the state through this COVID recession, a frequently asked questions article that was really great. We feature some of the performance of the reservation areas on one of those articles. So lots of resources for answering your questions, both at your local economy level and statewide as well.
Yeah, I would completely agree with it. If you are listening to this and you have not familiarized yourself with all of the data that is on that webpage, I highly encourage you to go in there and take a look. With that as well, I think Barbara alluded to a couple other areas that DLI can help people as they're trying to weather the effects of how this pandemic rolls out and affects each one of us on an individual level. But our job services, our job service personnel, the offices may not be open to the public, but we are certainly serving the public online and by appointment. So I encourage any of you who are job seekers or employers who are looking for employees to contact your local job service personnel. They do an outstanding job in knowing what is available and also helping you train up. If you want to take the opportunity to look into a different area, they can help you do that as well. And for employers that are out there trying to navigate all of the different safety protocols so that you have a safe and healthy workforce and staff in our Employment Relations Division and our Safety Consultation Unit, they are certainly available as a resource to all of you as well. So I encourage you to make use of the resources that are available through the Montana Department of Labor and Industry. We are certainly here to serve you, and we really need to work through all of this together. So thank you again, Barb. I appreciate you being here and sharing all of your knowledge. You do present it in a way that all of us feel like we can understand the knowledge that you're presenting and walk away with some very useful information. So thanks again for being here today. Would also like to thank Rebecca behind the scenes, Mike Peary, who heads up the data and analysis unit here at DLI, and all of the people actually at DLI who are doing a really good job serving the state. So until we meet again, everybody stay safe and healthy, wear your masks, wash your hands, and take care. Thanks so much.